Hi, everyone. This is Joni McGarry. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very excited to share my conversation with my good friend, Robyn Stylman. Robyn is an integrative health practitioner, and we're going to talk about her journey after she was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple years back. We're going to talk about how she put together a comprehensive care plan for herself that was very personalized and made use of many different modalities um, that worked for her. I found observing her journey through this very educational and inspiring, and I think you will as well. But before we get to our conversation, let me just put crowd health on your radar. I recently said I wasn't going to have health insurance anymore at the beginning of this year. The premiums were very high, the deductible was sky high, and I just didn't want to participate in that system. It just felt wrong to me. But I didn't want to be without coverage in the event of a big medical expense. Fortunately, I found Crowd Health instead. Crowd Health is not health insurance, but it's an alternative to it. It's a crowdfunding platform that enables members to fund each other's healthcare expenses. To be a member, you have to be under 65 and relatively healthy, and you'll pay a $60 a month membership fee. And then once a month, you'll get asked to help fund another member's healthcare expense. You know upfront what the maximum monthly ask will be. They never exceed the maximum, and most months they don't even ask you for the max. I personally am saving thousands of dollars this year, and I'm very confident because Crowd Health has paid out 99.9% of all asks to the crowd for funding in the last 5 years since they were founded. It's an excellent track record. So check it out. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. And if you do join, use the code JONI, JONI, to get a discount on your first 3 months. I'll put a special link in the show notes. They have no enrollment period. So if you want to join tomorrow, you can. So join the growing group of people that are trying to be part of a positive change in the healthcare industry. Check it out. It might be for you. So now let's get to the show. I'd like to welcome my good friend, Robyn Stylman, to the show. It's always just wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Joni. I am so excited to talk to you. And yeah, thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm really delighted to do it. We met a couple years ago, and then maybe a year after we met, you had a diagnosis of breast cancer. And that's where we wanted to start with your personal story and your healing journey and share what you learned and how you've navigated the whole system with people here. And I'll just make a note that this is not meant to be any kind of medical advice, and you can talk more about that. But I have found all of your choices and how you've moved through this extremely edifying and very inspirational. So I'm happy to share it here. So if you want to just start out with that at the beginning of your journey and where it has led you.
Sure. Well, yes. And I appreciate you saying that because I will also say I'm not a medical doctor and none of this is meant to be medical advice. This is just my story. And, my certification in this conversation is just my experience
Mhm.
and what I did, for myself. But I think that is sort of part of the point is that I really do believe in the idea of individualized care. And that is how I chose to approach my journey. And so, where it started really, years ago, when I was in my 20s, and I had an ulcer, and so I tried treating that with a lot of different medications over a few years, and nothing helped. And then a friend of mine who was studying in the Swedish Institute at the time in New York City recommended a acupuncturist on Canal Street who I went to see, and you know. Through food changes and some acupuncture and some herbs, within 6 months I was healed. And that was sort of
Wow.
like my first experience in healing. I grew up, sort of in a more traditional
Mhm.
environment, going, to doctors and whatnot. And that was sort of my first experience, sort of outside of, what I'll call like the standard, you know, um,
Allopathic Western medical,
yes, allopathic, exactly.
pharmaceutical-based system.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. And so, and so that kind of like put me on a little bit of a different track, but not completely. I still, used different modalities. And I still do, truthfully. But my next big experience was when one of my children was diagnosed with Crohn's, and the allopathic recommendations for him were, all the medications they wanted to put him on had really horrific side effects, and,
Wow. And how
my
old was
husband
he at that time?
he was about 12 years old at that time.
Wow.
I know, so he was young, and, this was also, like, it overlapped with early COVID days, and they wanted him to come into the hospital and with a mask on and sit for hours to get a intravenous IV, an IV and medications, and again, like I said, the side effects were so horrible, they were worse than, what his symptoms were, truthfully. And so, again, my husband and I decided at that point to work with a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, and, again, with food changes, nutrition changes, some different supplements, herbs, he also was healed, and
Wow.
he has, luckily, thankfully been in, his own remission from that for, years now. And so,
Without the horrific side effects.
without the horrific side effects, and not
Yeah.
only without the horrific side effects, but also getting healthier. That's the thing. And so this kind of brings me into my own cancer diagnosis. When I first got sort of the prescribed, treatment plan from
Mhm.
the first doctor I saw, I all I saw was myself getting sicker and sicker. I didn't see myself getting healthier in their plan because the recommendation for me personally, because of the type of cancer, breast cancer I had, and it, varies for everybody, but mine was weeks of chemotherapy first, then surgery, then more chemotherapy, then radiation.
Wow.
And, because of what I knew of some of these treatments, because I was lucky enough to have had a friend who was sort of already awake to some other options, and so I did have him sort of in my ear a little bit about it, which I'm grateful for, but when I was listening to that, I saw myself getting sicker, and I thought,
As a result of these treatments they
as a
were
result of
going
the
to be
treatment.
prescribing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and again, I really wanna take a moment just to say, like, I don't judge anybody for what they choose to do. I think that's sort of the point, right? We all should do what we feel right doing. But I do sort of feel like we're not given as much information as we should
Mhm.
be. And you're sort of, once you get a diagnosis, at least from my experience, what I found is you're sort of put on this conveyor belt and you're
Mhm.
just in the system, right? Within 24 hours, I had calls from all these different doctor offices that wanted to meet with me for things that wouldn't even be happening in my treatment plan for 8 months out. And, like, think about what that does to your nervous system, right? You're just like, you're already kind of overwhelmed by getting a diagnosis. I was completely blindsided by my
Sure.
diagnosis. I would have actually described myself as a relatively healthy person at the time. Um, and then you're kind of put on this system and a conveyor belt, and you're just kind of put into a bucket, right? And again, I also don't necessarily I don't blame the system in some ways
Mhm.
because I know that they are dealing with their own sort of um obstacles, time, money, I get it.
Mhm.
But it is not a system, in my opinion, that is set up to really make us healthy. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's
You
not,
know, but I think a lot of the people practicing in this system, which is increasingly hospital based and corporate based, and there's like what you were talking about was standard of care, right? So you go in
Yes.
with a particular diagnosis, and
Yeah.
then you get that standard of care protocol applied to you. And these are people who have been, they've dedicated their lives to this training. This is their belief that they're doing the very best thing they can. And they're only giving you, like you said, you get one part of the information. You're not getting any alternative, or it's, some doctors do, of course, but mostly you
Yeah.
wouldn't get any non clinical trial, gold standard science stuff that could really help you and supplement this or be used in place of those treatments that are considered standard of care.
Yeah.
So,
And listen,
yes, and that's the
and
conveyor belt for sure.
yes, and in the best of situations, you can ask your doctor about something outside of the tool set that they have, and in the best situation, they just say, "Oh, I don't know about that." In the worst situation, they say, "Oh, that's nothing. That's ridiculous. Don't listen." And so
Mhm.
you really do have to learn to be your own advocate and really navigate. And I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, it really became my full-time job, and I have 3 children at home, and it was a lot. And I don't say this, everything in this conversation, I don't say it like from the standpoint of like, oh, just do this. It's easy. No big deal. Like it's not. It's
Right.
hard. It's in fact, I would almost argue it's harder than just going along with the prescribed standard of care treatment plan because
Right.
everything there's kind of laid out for you, right? Whereas
Right.
this, it really does take a little extra work. But that said, um, I mean, without our health, what are
What do
we,
we
right?
have?
Like that's the thing, right? And so that was kind of the and I was very lucky because early on I heard something from somebody from a podcast I was listening to, a doctor speaking, a functional medicine practitioner who basically said with the exception of few cases, there are some cases in which, cancer, can be obstructing a critical function in your body, and that is sort of an emergency. But in the
Right.
majority of cases, like this is something that has been growing in your body for a while. If I'm talking about like a specific tumor, let's say, right?
Right.
Or um and you have some time. It's not she wasn't saying like don't just ignore it, but she was saying
Right.
like you don't have to decide what to do today, like overnight, right? Like you have a little time. And that really, for me at least, was very useful because it gave me the space to take a breath and to sort of like dig in a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What the cancer industry really is all about, right? And
Mhm.
it is, no one could really argue it's not, it is a business, right? It is an
Of course.
industry, right? Um, but between all, the studies they use to sort of classify you in certain ways, who's funding those, right? What's the language? I mean, just the language alone, right? That is used around cancer, war on cancer, you're fighting cancer, it's a battle, right? These are warlike terms that came from a
Yes.
very specific time, right? Dating back to the early 70s.
Mhm.
And like to me, like that language just didn't feel right. Like I changed that to thinking about how do you heal your system, right? How do you work? This is your body. Who are you? You're fighting your own body. That didn't make sense to me,
Right.
right? So I really looked at my body. I mean, I know some people might think it like sounds kind of wacky, and I am prone to do some really out of the box things, but like, I just started talking to my body, and really, like, looking at it as, like, my ally and my companion, and, like, we were in this together, right? Like, we could heal together.
Which
And
actually makes so much more sense than just surrendering to that embrace of, "We're gonna knock this thing out of you. We're gonna, poison your
yeah.
system." And I'm not saying, again, it's some chemotherapies, all that, there might be great results from some of it, I don't know, and I also don't know what I would do if I were presented with a diagnosis. My, Western medicine doctor and I were talking about that last night, actually, and
Yeah.
it would be really and I don't wanna have the experience, of course, but it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing, like, what you did and what you considered requires a lot of courage. I mean, it really does, because you have to make your own leap of faith, which is something that we are not programmed to do. We have been brought up in a society that really sets us up for we defer to experts.
I know, but you know what the thing is, and I think this is an important point, is, like, nobody knows, right? I don't know. Sitting here today, I'm a couple years out from my diagnosis, into, very gratefully in what they call remission right
Mhm.
now from this, right? But I don't know that all my choices were exactly the right ones. I really there's no way to know, but the truth is like I know people who have done all standard of care treatments and they're seemingly fine. I know people who've done all natural treatments, they're seemingly fine. I know a lot of people have done integrative treatments and they're seemingly fine. And then I know people who have done all of those and it didn't work out the way they
Yeah.
wanted to. Like nobody knows. And I think that's also the thing that, you go in and you see these surgeons and oncologists and they give you this plan. And at least for me, like I felt like, they make you think like, oh, 5 years out this, 10 years out that, right? Like they give you all this data. Or in a even more horrific case, they say, oh, you only have X amount of time, right? Well,
Right.
to me, that is the worst thing to do. Like, who are you to tell
How do they
anybody
know?
ever
Right.
how much time they have, right? Like none of us
Right.
are guaranteed any amount of time, right? And so I think like that was sort of my approach was like, I'm gonna really figure out how to trust my intuition and just trust that and go from there. And listen, I also was very fortunate. I was connected to a lot of different practitioners outside of the allopathic,
Mhm.
world, and I leaned on them heavily. And I'm so grateful for every single one of them. Um, But there was nothing special about me, right? I reached out to people who I thought might know people. I got books and I would listen to one podcast and they would
Mhm.
reference one doctor and I would go look up that doctor. Like I just dug in. I mean, I cannot tell you like how many podcasts I listened to, how many books. I probably have like 40 somewhat, books all
Mhm.
about different approaches to cancer care. I mean, I found the resources and I guess now, unfortunately, I do have a handful of people over the years who have come to me. And I'm so happy to be able to share those
Mhm.
resources. And again, not because I'm certainly not in the position to tell anybody how to approach their treatment plan, but I am in a position to share what I've learned and share
Sure.
the resources and just answer questions and just be as helpful as I can to friends and family. I mean, that's really my goal in all of this.
And you were able to do all that work because you had the wisdom of, "This is not an emergency." You in your particular case, like, you could take a breath,
In my
and
particular
then
case, yeah.
and so what did that look like? Did you were doing all the research, and then you had decided, I think, that you were going to have the tumor removed surgically.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
so did you have to shop around for doctors who would work with you when you said, "I'm not gonna take everything on the menu. I just want this thing." Like, tell
Yeah,
me, what was
yeah.
that like?
And it did take me a bit to have I ultimately had a lumpectomy. I was, a candidate for that. But I had to see 3 different surgeons before I found one who would work with me. This is, in New York City, the New York City
Mhm.
big hospitals. And I did ultimately find one that was, that respected my wishes of not doing chemotherapy first. I really wanted to go into surgery feeling the best I could. I wanted
Sure.
my immune system to be strong. I wanted my inflammation to be down. All these things that I felt like would be really important to come through a surgery. I never had surgery before. I'd never had anesthesia before. So this was a big deal for me personally.
Yeah.
Um, I so it took me a while. It took me, some doctors just wouldn't go along with it, wouldn't go along with my choices.
They
And then
wouldn't
I
do
found one who
surgery until you had chemo first.
right, they wanted me to have chemo first,
Right.
and I just thought like, I think they wanted me to have it was something like maybe
Mm.
16 weeks of chemo,
Wow.
before my surgery, and then take some time off so my body could recoup before my surgery, and so I just thought, well, if they were willing to see if chemo could like, the idea with chemo at that point is to like shrink your tumor.
Right.
I just thought, well, let me see if there's like other things I can do that either would, you know, really again, it was just for me, it was just about prepping my body in it to get
Mhm.
myself healthy, right? I realized at that point there were a lot of things that even though like I said, I did consider myself a healthy person, I personally have come to think that certain cancers, breast cancer in particular, at least in my case,
Mhm.
felt very emotional. It felt very
Mhm.
emotionally tied. I had been through a lot of different things in my life, as we all have. I was
Mhm.
coming off of the COVID years, which were quite a lot for a lot of us. I mean, we had
Yes.
relocated my family, which actually I think turned out to be one of the best things for my healing journey because I had access to fresh air and,
You
clean
moved from the city into
we moved
more
to
of
the
a
city,
country
yeah,
setting.
up to
Yeah.
the country setting, yeah, and some of the tools that I ended up using really were, I was able to do because of where I was, although
Mhm.
I think you can do a lot of them wherever, a lot of things wherever you are, but, yeah, so it took me a while to find a surgeon, and that's also, I guess I could have easily gone along with the first one and done what they told me, but, and again, I did have the past experiences of sort of healing alongside the system. Like, I am very much about an integrative approach. I'm not here to say, like, I actually think certain, Western medicine treatments are really, helpful for certainly acute situations,
Mhm.
if you break a bone, you wanna
You
be able to go get
you wanna go to
um
orthopedic
yeah,
person. Yeah.
and listen, again, like, even surgery, right? Like, I did for me personally, I felt like I kind of looked at it this way. I kind of looked at, like, if you're going up a mountain, right, or a hill, and you've got a boulder in front of you, it's gonna be a lot harder to get up that hill, right, if you're pushing it, and that's
Right.
kind of what I came to see, like,
Huh.
my tumor as. I wanted to, like, remove the bulk of, like, what I felt like was those cancer cells,
Mhm.
but I knew that it wasn't gonna be the end of it, I mean, that is just there's an analogy that a lot of people use where they say it's like mowing the lawn, not pulling the weeds, right? Taking a tumor out is you're just kind of getting rid of like the symptom, right? What you
Yeah.
really need to do, and this is sort of the way I think about cancer care, and actually I'll even say all like chronic conditions, right? And I put that in quotes, but um, you really have to work on the terrain of your system, right? You can't if cancer or something grows in your current system, there is a root cause of that.
Right.
And so for me, this all became about figuring out what was going on in the terrain, right? And there's a wonderful author, Naisha Winter. She's has a book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, but it really should be called The Metabolic Approach to Health, because she kind of takes you through. This is like the first book I recommend for people to get if they come to me either with cancer or anything really. That it goes through like a bunch of different chapters of different things, right? Everything from nutrition, your like movement, exercise, right? All
Mhm.
things like that to also emotional, issues. It just kind of goes through all different things that could be happening. Like genes only account for so much, right? And I
Mhm.
think we've kind of been like not misled necessarily, but like a lot of, but especially with cancer, right? Like there was an emphasis for a long time on it being gene driven, but there's also this other approach called that it's a metabolic approach. It's a terrain approach. And so that's kind of where my head landed at. And that
Mhm.
all made sense to me when I read that book. And I read a few different books at that time. I really came to understand cancer in a different way. And so
Mhm.
that is really what changed my approach.
So, you decided to have surgery, and then what were the other modalities that you were, choosing for yourself during this time before and after?
Sure.
Um
And again, this was just my path, but
Mhm.
I I did dive into some of the off-label medications like that, that had been out there, ivermectin. I did some fasting,
Mhm.
which there's a lot of work being done around fasting and how effective that can be because you're really starving the cancer cells on the
Mhm.
things that they feed on. I did there's high dose vitamin C
Mhm.
IV. And I did that, hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Like there's all these things that kind of work together too.
Did you have, an alternative practitioner guiding you
I
to make
did, yes,
like,
yes.
or was it a patchwork you were putting together?
It's kind of a patchwork of people I put together, but yes, I didn't do any of this just like on my own without
Mhm.
supervision. I actually really wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I know a lot of people who do kind of dive in at least at the beginning, and that's fine. But I mean, obviously that's fine. But I'm saying for like, I do think that it's helpful to have people who really like have experience with some of these things, right, to guide you. Because there are certain things, like even with, vitamin IV, there's like a certain you have to get blood work done first to make sure that you're a candidate. Like there are things that, you do need to sort of be smart about.
Mhm.
And again, like, because yes, there is a lot of information out there and, you do wanna kind of be, kind of, just mindful about who
Mhm.
you're listening to.
Sure.
And so, I did like listen, so I mean, at first, I will say, like, nutrition was the first thing I did, and that's, like, the first easiest thing you can do, right? I mean, for me, that was, like I did cut out alcohol completely, I lowered, just I mean, again, I was a pretty healthy eater, but
Mhm.
it's almost more what I added in than cut out, like, there are certain foods that are just have a ton of anti-cancer properties, garlic, onion, I mean, there you can find all this,
Mhm.
this is accessible, I won't go through it all, but there's a lot of foods that you could add into your
Mhm.
plan that actually have a lot of anti-cancer properties, so that I focus on nutrition. Movement is, like, super, super important, right? Getting your lymphatic system going. I mean, like, your lymphatic system doesn't have its own drainage, right? You need to be its movement, right? And
Mhm.
that is so important for moving things and getting, toxins out and, abnormal cells, right? Just like keeping everything going. So I started getting into like qigong and, I was sauning, just really, working with a team to kind of get me. There were certainly supplements I added in.
Mhm.
One thing I will point out is, and if you can do this, I really recommend it, is seeing a doctor who will run, and sometimes these are functional medicine practitioners, doctors who will run blood work that your standard of care doctor won't necessarily. I mean, the one test they kept asking me to get was a genetic test at my standard of care treatment. Whereas for me, like, I wanted to know what was going on in like every system in my
Mhm.
body, right? Like, what, again, it's about getting to the root, right? And so there's so many different types of tests you can do, and some people will say, like, some of them, it's over the top, right? And that may be true, but, again, there's different beliefs, and I think that the biggest thing for me was just I said this before, but I go back to it because it was just really learning to use my own discernment, like, to really listen to myself. If someone suggested something and it didn't feel totally
Mhm.
right with me, I would maybe spend a little bit more time, and then there were things people suggested that just, like, clicked, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Yes," you know? And also, like, looking at what other countries are doing, like, for example, like mistletoe therapy is something that the FDA now is looking at, that it's standard, that goes along with standard treatment of care in a lot of other countries. And
Interesting.
so, there are things like people say, like, what is that? Right. And so there are things that for me, like, I will admit I'm a bit of a researcher by nature. So
Mhm.
so this kind of just came a little bit more easily to me, but there are a ton of resources and I'm happy to like share them with you. And I don't know if you could share them
Oh,
somehow,
I can
but
put I'll put them all in the show notes. You and I can make a
yeah,
list of
books
them.
I would recommend, people I would recommend to listen to. There's so many resources. It can be overwhelming at times,
Oh,
but
I'm sure.
you kind of find your people, right?
Mhm.
And you figure it out. And so, um, yeah, but those were some of the things I did. I mean, those were listen, there's also like a lot of those things I mentioned, I think like actually cost money. There's a ton of free things, right? That do not cost money. Like one of my biggest things I tell people right away is like, take your shoes off and put your feet on grass. I've probably told you this
Right.
before,
You
like,
haven't actually, but,
oh, really?
the
Yeah,
whole
like
grounding, the notion of
grounding.
grounding and being in touch with the planet without
There
intermediate
and the
materials
earth
is
is so
important.
healing. The earth is so healing, right? You know, sunshine is so healing, right? Getting in a good sleep rhythm, right? That is sleep is a free resource, right? And it's all disrupted for all of us, right? Because we're staring
Yeah.
at our phones right before bed and we're looking at them first thing in the morning, like putting your phone down, like I said, movement can be free, right? Like go outside, shake your body out. If you Google a qigong video or yoga, all these things, like these are free resources that we all have access to. So healing can be very expensive. I will admit that. I'm not denying that,
Especially
but
outside the system because insurance, if you have health insurance, it will cover standard of care things and not other things.
a hundred
That
percent.
is a really good
Yes.
point to make because not everyone is in the situation, whether maybe they're working full time or they don't have these resources. So,
A
it's
hundred
nice that there
percent.
is a suite of things that people can do and look at that will make their care more holistic that isn't a fortune.
Yeah, and the other thing I will tell you, and I'll just share this, is that, I would listen to certain podcasts, and a lot of them would be about people who healed outside of the system, right? Because that was
Mhm.
inspiring to me,
Mhm.
and even if I would get, listen, it wasn't like I was just coasting through this. I had my moments, right, of getting like scared or
Oh,
questioning my
of
choices, and
course.
I would just go and listen to one of these healing stories, and the one of the most common themes I will say was that everybody, and listen, getting a scary diagnosis will do this to you, right? But was just having some sort of like prayer or meditation or just
Mhm.
some sort of like belief outside of just like that, like, everything we see is all there is, right? Like
Right, like,
just
it's something deeper than a materialist view.
100%, right?
Yeah.
And that's another free resource, right? Is just like, so I would like go outside my backyard, would sit against a tree, I would like take some breaths, right? And I would just like really relax. I mean, that's what it is. It's just like your central nervous system just needs to be relaxed and you make better decisions that way. I feel like, this concept of making like fear-based decisions just I don't think it's working for a lot of people anymore. I mean, I think that is one thing that COVID really did wake up in a lot of people, and
Yeah.
maybe people were way to it before that. For me, certainly, um, I really learned how to not make fear-based decisions and just to take my breaths, take my time, use my resources, do what I needed to do to get in the right headspace, to, just come at it in a different way. So,
Which is, that's a challenge to do. I mean, cancer is a scary diagnosis, and
for sure.
how could you not be in a place unless you're very intentional to make fear-based decisions? So, you chose these other modalities, and what resonates with me really is that whole sense of discernment and taking a breath and settling in and trusting your intuition and educating yourself and using those 2 things in combination to navigate the world, and it's something, like, I'm feeling like just a pull toward doing more of because I'm so in my head, and I've been having conversations with people like you who are moving into a less materialist um, modality, and it feels right to me. It resonates because if you pull the camera back a little bit and open your mind, it makes sense. It's a lot. It's even logical. It's not woo woo or out there. Of course, we're a living, breathing, viable system that we have many unseen things in our energy, in our bodies that respond in all sorts of different ways, and um, so I find that very inspiring. So you ultimately did have surgery and
I
you
did, yeah,
prepared
yep, so
yourself. And so tell us what happened after that and where you are now and how you've channeled all of your experience into becoming a practitioner and offering healing to other people and what you've learned.
yeah, you know, so I spent a few months really getting my system, ready. I felt really ready. I had my surgery. I recovered really beautifully. I have to say, like, I was kind of shocked. Just
Yeah.
like, and then I kept going. Right, I didn't just stop there. Right, I mean, I again, like I said, I did not do the chemo or radiation. Route that, for me just wasn't a good fit but,
And let me just ask you a question.
yeah.
Did you get a lot of
Mhm.
pushback from other people who were afraid for you? Like, I remember right about that time, was it Elle Macpherson, some
Yes.
supermodel who had
Yeah.
5 years ago make the choices that you made, that she wasn't
Yeah.
gonna do the other things, she just had a lumpectomy, and people, like, came out against that like it was some dangerous position even though she was in fabulous health
Well, you
and
know what's
was
so
just sharing her story. So I wonder, like, did you
it
get
really
pushback?
I got some pushback from some people, but, what really, like, people were really supportive because the way I explained it was just like, this is how I'm choosing to do it, right? Like, this is my own personal choice, and and again, like I said earlier, like, I no one knows what is gonna work. It really drives me crazy when I'll see, like, a headline like, "So and so, died from cancer because they chose, alternative treatments," or whatever. Because the truth is, like, you would never see a headline like that saying, "Oh, so and so did 3 years of chemotherapy and then died," right? Which unfortunately happens too, right? Like,
Right, and then
and
they died because they chose the
well,
chemotherapy. They
yeah,
just would say
maybe.
she fought valiantly and
Uh,
lost her
right,
battle.
right, and
You're
nothing.
exactly right.
It
Such
just
a
drives me
bias.
crazy because it's such a bias because the truth is, like, again, like, none of us know, and we are all individuals, and this is my hope, is that we just continue to move towards, and I say continue because I do feel like there is a little bit of, like, a renaissance underway of this
Yes.
happening, that people are starting to realize, like, I'm an individual. My body is, made up of different things than someone else's body. I mean, yes, we all
Right.
maybe have similar, like, organs, and there are things that are
Sure.
similar, but, like, and also the way my body's gonna react to something isn't the same somebody else's is, and there are tests. I mean, that's the other thing. There's some thought that, like, blood work is gonna become sort of like the future of, like, diagnosis versus, like, scans and things because the technology is evolving, right? And that's another thing I do. Like, I do, blood work every 3 months, which does kind of look for cancer cells in your body. Because that's the
Mhm.
other thing, you don't really hear a lot about is, you could take a tumor out, but there are I mean, we all have cancer cells in our body, like, all the
Right.
time, right? Just most of our immune systems can fight them off. Um, so you really need to address that as well, right? Like, and these treatments don't do that, right? Just none of the standard of care treatments do that get to the cancer stem cells, right? And that's, like, something people can look into too. But there's for me, like, the things I did, I also want to say, like, I didn't necessarily do them because they're cancer, you know, um, cures, because that's not a
Mhm.
thing. It's more like what they do is they boost your immune system, like I mentioned, even, like, the vitamin C, the mistletoe, right? Like, all these things, the sauna, like, they're not none of these things on their own are gonna, like, I don't think, like, probably, like, get rid of your cancer, right? It's more
Mhm.
about, like, boosting your immune system, turning things back on, lowering your inflammation, right? Getting your cells, like, healthy again, right? That's I just wanna make that point because,
Mhm.
like, I think it's really important that it's so after my surgery, to bring it back to that, I just continued on with these things, right? Because I knew that, that I wasn't, like, done, right? There was so much to do, particularly because I wasn't, going along with anything, from the standard industry. I
Mhm,
sort of, like, needed to create my own healing path, and
mhm,
so, and, even to this day, I still do a lot of it. I mean, not maybe as, like, aggressively as I was doing things
mhm,
right after surgery and, like, for, like, the 6 months to a year right after that, but I still do a lot of it, and I will probably do a lot of it for a long time,
mhm,
I mean, certainly the nutrition element, I'm still really careful about, the movement element. I mean, the things that come easy, right? They're
mhm,
sort of just part of my routine now, to be
mhm,
honest. Like, it's not like, I don't really think a lot about it. In fact, like, unfortunately, I had a friend just reach out to me who was newly diagnosed with breast cancer, and
mm.
I sort of had to go back to, like, my emails from a few years ago to kind of remind myself, like, of some of, like, the real acute things, because it just kind of becomes second nature in a
Right.
a lot of ways. It's a whole lifestyle change. I mean, that I think is the whole point, right? Like, for
And
me.
anyone can benefit from a lot of those lifestyle changes,
Oh,
you know?
100. And well, and that kind of gets me to, like, really what I think is the most important thing is, like, the best thing to do is just, like, not get anything to begin with, right? And, like, there's actually, I'm actually also on top of some of the other things I'm sort of studying right now, which I can talk about, is I'm also doing an acute homeopathy course. And one of the things they say in the course was, um, all, if most, if not all, like, chronic conditions really started out as something acute that just
Mhm.
wasn't dealt with, in the right way to begin with. So it was either ignored or suppressed, right? And so that's kind of where my head's at now. It's like, let's not wait till something really catastrophic
Right.
happens, right? Let's get ahead of it, right? And so I'm really now about kind of prevention, and just, like, getting, like, talking to people before things happen, right? This is why I want to share information, because it's like, if we can, some of these things, I mean, all of these things, I mean, maybe, not all of them in, like, the more aggressive kind of things, but certainly, like, the grounding, the sunshine, right? The saunaing, the detoxing, the Epsom salt baths. There's so many easier things to do that just keep your system running better. And we
Mhm.
are living in a very toxic world. I think we
Oh
all know
gosh,
this,
we're
right?
swimming in it.
So we are fighting a lot of different things, right? Although I don't like that word fighting, but we do need to heal from a lot of different things. And so I'm at a place now where, I sort of decided a couple years ago to, well, I had already pre-COVID, I had started my integrative health practitioner path. Um, but I really got into, something I learned about something called biofield tuning, which,
Mhm,
is, I have studied under a place in, Vermont led by Eileen McCusick, and,
mhm,
she, the whole concept of biofield tuning is really just working with sound and vibration to bring your system back into coherence. And, um, you know, it's to me, it's just another tool in the toolkit, that goes along with just the concept that, like, we've all experienced different things in our lives. And, the concept is, like, it get kind of energy pockets can get stuck outside your field. And this method just kind of brings it all back into balance. And it's just
mhm,
really relaxing. It's really calming for the central nervous system. So that's a tool that I've leaned on now that I'm in remission. There are a few contraindications on working, with that you need to be aware of as a practitioner. I if somebody, I feel like for me, if somebody's immune system is really struggling, whether it be from either, dealing with any sort of diagnosis,
mhm,
I may not use it, like, right at
mhm,
that. That's me personally. I'm also very
mhm,
new to it. I'm sure there are some practitioners very seasoned that would, know how to figure that out. But that's, like, one thing that, I've gotten into, and then, I do think homeopathy is a really amazing, tool in the
mhm,
toolkit, because, again, for me, because I'm studying it for acute cases, it's more like, just getting to something before it manifests into something
right,
chronic. If it's something chronic already, I would definitely, recommend a very seasoned homeopath for that.
mhm. Let me just
But
stop right there for
again, these are
one.
just tools, these are just different tools. Yeah.
And it's part of just like a whole, comprehensive approach to a person, to have like a whole basket of modalities to use instead of one narrow focus, which is, the standard of care focus. Let me just, before we get into that, because I want to talk about the biofield tuning, because I've actually had the benefit of having you work on me with that, which is
Yes.
a kind of such an interesting, such an interesting concept. But back, so since, gosh, now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, so since your surgery and you're in remission,
Yes.
and and do have blood work. So are you still in that the Western system where they're checking on you, and you're also? It sounds like you're continuing to just try to get yourself into the best health possible, so it doesn't
Yeah, so
happen
so
again or doesn't regrow. But what is the protocol that you're still participating in to scan for any possible
yes.
recurrence?
And thank you for bringing that up because that is important. Like, it's not like I just dipped out, and was like, "I'm done."
Yeah.
No, I have an oncologist who I took my time finding the right fit for me, and she's amazing. And I see her. I was seeing her every 3 months. Now I see her every 4 months. And she runs a whole bunch of different blood work on me, just checking different levels. Because
Mhm.
that's the thing. It's also, it's not just about, like, I mean, it's like you're saying, it's sort of, it's, you need the whole picture of what's going
Mhm.
on, right? There's not one indicator, but there are different things that could indicate something, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I do that, and I see her every 4 months now. And I guess as time goes on, that will probably lessen,
Mhm.
but right now
Mhm.
that's where I'm at with that. I still am working with a few of my other practitioners, on a supplement plan, just really anything that comes up to keep my system. I personally do, energy work because I just believe in that. Like,
Mhm.
I like to keep things moving. Like I said, I did a lot of emotional, sort of generational trauma work personally, like, just to
Mhm.
really, like, sort out some stuff. I think that that is a really, really big component
And was that
of
mostly like
healing
a
from
talk
anything.
therapy thing? Was it a talk
It was
therapy
it was
or?
actually it was actually a combination, it was a combination of, I mean, I did do talk therapy, but, I participated in some, like, different types of body work and,
Mhm.
some different types of, I like, for lack of a better word, like, rituals, like, not, like not like,
The good kind of rituals.
scary rituals, but
Right.
just like, things like forgiveness, working on forgiveness
Mhm.
and letting go of some generational patterns that I was holding, and things like that. So it wasn't, again, it was things that resonated with me. This won't
Mhm.
necessarily resonate with everyone, but for me, it felt really powerful. And I learned just, I mean, I also, for me, again, I got really into astrology actually and
Mhm.
understanding, like, my own birth chart, and
Mhm.
that has been, again, for me, like, a really cool tool to just understanding things in a larger way. And
Mhm.
I'm still very new at it, but
Mhm.
it's something that really resonated with me, and sort of an understanding, the placements. I mean, just like a really quick brief, things like the placement of, like, planets in your houses and your charts. There's a whole thing that it's a language. It's really
And it's ancient. I mean,
it's an
it's
ancient language that was
and
incorporated into every facet of life. Before it
and I
was
think
like,
it still is for some people, like.
it is, yes, and it should be. I mean, I really love it. I mean, it really can tell you a lot about, like,
Mhm.
at least when I've had a couple readings and I've learned it on my own, and it always makes so much sense to me. So, I just kind of got interested in a lot of different things, which, again, like you said earlier, not everyone has the time for that, and I really do get that, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of that, but listen, I do think we also could all admit that we probably spend a lot of time scrolling on our
Oh,
phones, and,
yeah.
like, like, I think, like, we probably could find more time in the day than we'd want to admit. And, I just think that if you find things that make you feel better, like,
Yeah, how can that be
that right,
that are
like,
not, like, unhealthy things like eating a box of donuts
oh,
or something, but
right, yes,
yeah,
yes, thank you
then
for that
right,
clarification.
but if you
Yeah,
feel better, you have less stress, you have less stress chemicals in your body, it all makes sense, and I'm s
it's
it like,
simple. It's
it's simple and
really
it's
simple.
inspiring. Yeah.
Health doesn't have to be as complicated as we're made to believe, and again, I'm not, I mean, I even personally know people who, have had really challenging health issues, and, some have overcome them and some unfortunately haven't, but I think that that was part of it for me too, like, just owning, owning the results, right? And, for me, like, I feel like there's a difference between living and being alive, right? Like, you you could be kept alive in lots of different ways these
Mhm.
days, right? And sometimes it's not actually, like, the best scenario, right? And then there's living, right? And so for me, I really, like, ask myself, like, what is the quality of the life I want? Whether it's for, however many years it is, right? And I kind of just let that be my North Star, how can I live, like, my fullest life? And so right now, like, yes, I do still have to do things to look after myself in a different way, like, I'm very careful of, my boundaries now. I'm really careful about, overdoing it and, taking time to rest, which,
Mhm.
I know in our culture is like like
Yeah,
rest is like,
like, you
"Ah."
feel bad about it,
You
I really struggle with that, sitting down in the middle of the day and reading a book,
There's a
or
wonderful quote that somebody shared with me that I'll just share with you because I think it's so powerful, and it says, may not be exact, but it says something to the effect of, instead of asking, "Have I done enough to rest?" Or no, instead of asking if I've worked hard enough to rest, I now ask if I've rested enough to do my best work. And I think that that's such a powerful way of thinking about it, right? It's like we work, 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 we're busy, 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 and then we collapse. But really, like, we if we take the time to take care of ourselves,
Mhm,
and rest, however that means for a person,
mhm,
like, you're so much more effective and
and
efficient, right?
present,
And
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 present.
present, right. So that idea really stayed with me, and I've really taken it to heart. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is all stuff I really need to hear.
Yeah.
So you're using all the modalities to continue to take care of yourself and to continue to monitor yourself in a responsible way.
Yes,
Um,
100%, and I still do
and
some screening. I mean, I do, like, the screenings that I'm comfortable with. I've learned a lot. That's why I
when you say
said sort of
screaming, you mean imaging?
screening.
Screening,
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, screening,
radiologic
yeah.
things, yeah.
Yeah, some imaging just, that I'm comfortable with, that I feel like is okay. I mean, there's a lot of different opinions about, the toxins that are used for certain screenings, and I'm very aware of that, and I pay attention to that, and so I think that, again, this all goes along with just educating yourself
Mhm,
and figuring out what works best for you and what you feel
mhm.
comfortable with. But yes,
Finding your
but
own agency.
yeah, and I feel, I will say, like, listen, like I said earlier, like, none of us are guaranteed anything, right? So I feel like I am in the place now where if, something would come up, like, I have resources, right? I have
Mhm,
access to knowledge, and I'm not just talking about, like, cancer, I'm just talking about health in general,
mhm,
right? Like, for myself, for my friends, for my family, like, I just think that, it actually feels good to be so informed now, whereas, it could be overwhelming and scary, but once, like, knowledge, what is the saying? Knowledge is power, right? Is that
mhm.
like,
Something like that. Well, it depends
something like
on,
that,
like, if
right?
it's biblical or if it's, business, I don't know, but yes, it is
Yeah, but
power.
it's just I looked at everything as, like, information,
Yeah.
every test result I got was more information. If before I would do a certain screening or a certain blood work, I would say, like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose? What will I do? What will
What are
be
you
my
gonna do?
reaction? What
Yes,
are you gonna do with this, right? And I think
yes.
that's a really great question to ask. And again,
For
I
any kind of testing,
for
anytime,
anything. And
because it's
I have yeah.
yeah.
And I have been
N
surrounded by amazing practitioners. So I really do want to say, like, there are people out there who are so good at their jobs in this world, and, like, in supporting you through these
Mhm,
things. And, um, if you want to find them, you will find them. Like, I can tell you, I won't, but I can tell you some crazy stories about how some of these people came into my life. Like, it, it felt surreal a lot of the
mhm,
time, like they would, like, in one case, I heard about one person from 3 different people who didn't even know each other at the same time from 3 different sources, and that ended up being, like, one of my main resources.
mhm.
It was just miracle after miracle too, which, is kind of amazing. But, so set the intention and it will, hopefully manifest for you.
Well, and I think, again, just going back to this notion of you have a little time, you can take a breath, and you can open yourself up. And I think I really do think it takes a lot of courage and curiosity to explore a new landscape and to adopt a new way of being in the
Yeah, listen,
world,
it's
for
not,
sure.
yeah, and I think a lot of people have experienced that, right? Like, it's not always easy going against the grain. I mean, I think, like, a lot of people have experienced that the past few years, right?
Yeah,
So there's
for
nothing,
sure.
special or different. In fact, it's funny because I don't really talk a lot publicly about, like, what, just myself. And, and I had a friend recently say to me, "But, like, you learned from the people that shared. If they hadn't shared, you wouldn't have learned." And so I
Right.
thought, "You're right." Like, I was so inspired by these stories, like, and now, I'm hesitant to say, like, I can be one of the stories for people because, again, like, I just did what was right for me, but that's if
But
I
that's
can
what it
share it, even if
is.
one person,
Mhm,
just thinks to, like, that, like, says to themselves, like, "You know what? I'm not comfortable just, like, with what I know right now. I wanna learn more."
mhm,
That to me is like a success, like, I feel like and I feel we're primed for this. I really do. I feel like, listen, there is a lot of information out there, which definitely makes it easier. It also makes it harder in some ways, right? It's
right.
both a blessing and a curse, but I feel like we're at a time right now, even just connecting to people. Like, there's this one woman I follow on Instagram who was just such an inspiration to me, and I've, like, DM'd her a few times,
Mhm,
and you know, and she's responded, and it's like that's so useful and amazing, right? And so, just like, don't be afraid to reach out to people too. Like, people, I believe, genuinely want to help, right? I
mhm.
think the majority of people are really, really want to help and support, and so, I just
Especially
encourage
if they've had
people.
their own experience because it's a renewal of their own hope and their own, commitment to what worked
Yeah.
for them. So you have now, you're doing your integrative health practice and you're, learning new tools, homeopathy and the biofield energy work. Tell us a little bit more about what the biofield energy work is, and what tools you use to practice it.
Okay.
Like,
So
the
again,
physical tools. I know you're new at it,
I'm
and
new. So yeah,
you're
I don't
and
wanna
and
come
I
across
don't wanna
as
put you
like,
on the spot to be an expert,
no,
but
you're not. You're not. And
most people don't know about this, and so just, briefly, what is it and
yeah.
how does it work?
Yeah, and I'm really happy to share. And because I love it so much, and the stories that have been shared amongst the community are so inspiring. And so but basically, in a nutshell, so, there are a lot most the work is largely done with tuning forks, which, I don't have one sitting right here with me, but, otherwise I would show you. But you could, do a quick search
Mhm,
of tuning forks and you'll find it. And basically they're all sort of, programmed at different frequencies. And so there's a few different I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do, within biofield tuning, but, one aspect of it is sort of working in a person's field, which, if you think about, you've heard about someone's like aura, right? So you kind
mhm.
of picture this field around them. And, we've heard about this like 6 feet field, right? That, goes out from your body. And, there's a lot of information about that, 6 to 10 feet in the heart, where the hearts connect with each other, right? And so,
So maybe that was reason why they wanted us 6 feet away from each other so that we
mhm,
couldn't even have that kind of,
mhm,
metaphysical contact, but I'm
maybe.
sure that's just a crazy theory, but anyway,
That's
go
just
on.
a conspiracy theory, Joni. But that is, I think that, I mean, this is not again, the thing that this is not just like some like I mean, I hate the word woo woo because it's like, what does that even mean? But a lot of this is backed by science, right? And I think
Right.
that's like the thing that like I'll preface all this by saying is like even all these treatments that I'm talking about that you won't hear about from your, standard treatment of care doctors, like these are not things that are just pulled out of thin air that people
Right.
try, right? They're backed by data, right? It may not be the data that, they want shared, because it's
Well,
not
because
maybe
it's
like
not patentable
funded
or
funded
yeah,
certain people
right.
think certain things can't be patented and all that. That's obviously a separate conversation. But even within biofield tuning, right? I mean, we are energetic beings there. I don't think anyone could dispute that, right? And so I mean, it's like the idea of like how many times have you thought about calling someone and you think it and then like 5
They
minutes
call
later
you.
that person calls you, right? So
Right.
like and that's kind of how I explain how this biofield tuning works remotely, which is what I've done on you. So
Mhm.
you could either do it remotely or you can do it in person. And one of the main components is you're basically like working in the person's field and you're kind of sensing through their timeline, right? You start out in the field before conception even, right? And you're kind of working your way into conception, gestation, all, and then through the timeline, and the closer you get to the person's body, that's their current age. And you're sensing with the fourth. I mean, it's really a practice that takes, it's exactly that. It's a practice, and that's why I say I'm so new at it, and there's people who are so, much more seasoned at it. But I will say, like, I really got comfortable with it quickly. Like, it felt
Mhm.
very sort of like natural in a way for
Mhm.
me. So maybe I've done it before, I don't know, but you work in the field and you're basically, the easiest way to explain it is you're kind of just picking up like pockets of stuck energy, right? And so it could be something that happened at a particular age that was really traumatic and you're sensing that, or it could just be like not a huge thing, first day of kindergarten jitters, whatever, right? But you're using these forks, and as a practitioner, you're kind of listening and you're
And
listening to the
the forks have different
vibration.
vibration, and they have different sounds too,
They
different
have different
tones.
vibrations, different
Yes.
frequencies. Yeah, yep. And there's weighted forks and unweighted forks, which you use for different reasons. And so that's why I say it's kind of a combination of vibration and tone. And you're just like I said, you're just bringing you're kind of working through those stuck periods, and you're bringing that energy back into like the body system, and just to bring it into coherence, right?
Mhm.
And you could work on the same person a bunch of different times and you'll find different things, right? We're
Mhm.
endless, we're endless. It's an
Re
endless process. I mean, really, and it's not, again, like, but thing is, it's not, we don't say like we treat anything or we cure anything. I mean, it's not about that, right? It's just another tool to help you sort of calm the central nervous
Mhm.
system. I mean, listen, I will say, like, I've heard miraculous stories from people who had certain pains that were lingering for years and they couldn't get them to go away. And, they saw this practitioner 3 times and they were gone,
Mhm.
So I also don't want to belittle it. Like, it's a subtle but powerful practice. But I have yet to work with anybody who has not said that they certainly felt relaxed after it. And then even beyond that, right?
Mhm.
Felt things shifting in their body sometimes, like with a
Well,
lot of energy.
that definitely was my experience, for
Yeah.
sure, working with you on that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
something that
sometimes you feel it like a few days later, right? You don't
Mhm.
even feel it in the moment. It's like it's a reciprocal kind of
Yeah.
experience, right? Yeah. Um, and so yeah, so I am actually finishing my certification in that right now. I have a few practice sessions left, and thank you for letting me practice on you.
Happy to do it anytime.
But I'm excited because it's something that I really think could be really helpful for people,
Mhm.
it's really good for anxiety, stress, those kind of things. You know, like I said, there are some contraindications, you want to be careful about certain things, right? You don't want to like put a fork necessarily on like a metal plate in someone's body,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Again, there are different things, but any trained practitioner will know about those
Mhm.
things, and I will say, like, if you go see someone and they don't ask you first, like, if you don't have, like, kind of a conversation first, like, I would be a little wary because there are
Yeah.
things, like, someone should know, but, yeah, it's just become something that I'm really interested in, and, I think for me, like, I do it on myself. That's another
Mhm.
cool thing. Like, you could actually do it on yourself in a different way, not like the field combing's a little harder,
Mhm.
but just even using the fork to activate certain like points on your
Mhm.
body to kind of just get things flowing and moving. I definitely consider that one of the tools that I use just in my
Mhm.
care. And so again, there's a lot of information out there. If you just look for, biofield tuning. Again, like I mentioned, I, studied under Eileen McCusick's
Mhm.
umbrella. And
Mhm.
so I can
And she
share
has a
that
number of different courses.
research
We
with
can put
you.
that in the notes.
Yeah, she has a number of courses. She has some books that are really,
Mhm.
really fascinating to kind of explain it all. But that's sort of the short description.
So, we're coming up onto an hour, and,
Oh,
so I know it goes so fast.
God.
So, at any point in time, do you think you might, make yourself available to be a professional, provider of, health services in any way?
Yeah,
Like, with your modalities together, where do you see that going in terms of, like, not a I don't wanna say call it a business, but a business, like,
yeah,
hanging
no,
out your shingle to say, "I can help you with these things."
thank you for asking that. Yeah, up to now, it's all been friends and family just because, I really just wanted to take some time to like refine my skills.
Mhm,
But yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time, and at some point, I will probably make that leap.
mhm,
I am very much of the mindset right now, and this is sort of like a new way for me to go about things, but of kind of being very much in the moment, right? I try
mhm,
not to think like too far out, even like that's just how I feel. So right now, I'm like still in the getting all the resources together for myself, but I I feel like if I can be of service to support somebody, that's really appealing to me, right? Just because, and again, I don't look at it as like I am healing them at all. Like I look at it as like it is a collaborative effort,
mhm.
right? Like we work together. That's
Yes.
really the approach that I was gifted with from, people I worked with, and I really believe in that. And so yeah, but I'm really I'm really bad at the putting myself out there part. So
Well,
I
I
tend to
hope
be
to
like a
be
little
able to
bit
help
private. Yeah,
I
so
hope to
this
be
is
able to
like
help
a
you with that if that would be
y
useful
yeah,
because
no, thank you for having me on just to, like, talk about some of this because I do feel like, the timing feels right.
Mhm.
I feel like there's more and more people who are interested in it and more open-minded to it, and I think, a lot of people are sort of well, unfortunately, because a lot of people are dealing with health issues now, I
Yeah.
mean, we
Seems like
are
a whole lot of
unfortunately
cancer
and
in
and
the
other
af
things,
yeah.
and other things, and I just, this was sort of my goal in all this was just like I kind of had a feeling. I mean, I guess it wasn't like, shouldn't have been so surprised about it that things would be coming up for people, and
Yeah.
because I had my own experiences, I just felt like I had learned a good amount, and you know, again, just trained in a different way than like a medical doctor, but I feel like people not only are getting these diagnoses, but they are recognizing that some of the old ways of treatment just aren't, the results just aren't, you know, eh, aren't showing what,
Right.
like what people want to see, right? They're not, it's not working, or things are coming back, or and again, this can all happen no matter what. But I'm just finding people are way more open minded. I have a
Mhm.
lot of people that I wouldn't have even expected listening, and then some people aren't. And I will say, like, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. Like, this conversation to me is just for the people who like want to receive it, right? Like
Right, right.
I'm not like, trying to convince anyone of something. If they are perfectly happy in the system, and by all means, like
Right,
that's your
right.
choice, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm just
But that's the whole
here.
point, it's a
That's the whole
choice.
point. It's a
Yep.
choice. Yes, beautifully said. Like it should be a choice, right? And it should be a choice, and where we're made aware of all of our options,
Mhm.
right? Or at least not made to feel silly. I mean, what was the whole thing during COVID? It was like, do your own research became like an insult, right? Like that
Right.
person. It was so ridiculous. Like, why would we make that a bad
It's
thing?
so
Like
it's so insulting and
it was
belittling, and also what it does is it takes away all of your agency, which is
100%.
very useful to people who want to be able to control what you do for whatever motives, and I think
Yes.
that, like, in what you're talking about, like, you tell your story, it gives other people cover to tell their story, to
Yeah.
learn from you, and it's so clear that your intentions are to be a healing force. And even this conversation for me, and I had a similar one earlier this week,
Yeah.
it moves me on a level, a profound level. It really
Yeah.
makes me like, it opens me up and makes me, take a little, a different stock of where I am and set
Yeah.
different kinds of intentions, and I'm not dealing with, I don't think, any big chronic health issue right now, and it still can shift somebody into a better way of thinking, I think.
Well,
So,
and I so
very
appreciate you
useful to
having
me.
I so appreciate you having the conversations because I'm still, I mean, I hope I'm always like this. Like I want to learn
Yeah,
consistently, constantly. Like if something comes up that someone knows of that or something I've said that they don't feel, like share like that. I just think this whole idea of like let's talk, let's
yeah,
communicate, let's share, right? Like that's I mean, as like human beings, like this is what we can do best, right? And
yeah.
so I'm so grateful that you have these conversations with people. I've learned a lot from your conversations with
Oh,
people,
thanks.
and yeah, and I really do appreciate you giving me this opportunity. So
Well,
it's sort
I
of
wanna have
nudging,
you back on in the future, and is there any way anything in the show notes that where people can find you? I mean, you and I will talk offline, and I'll give, like, an exhaustive list of resources that you would like to share, but for you personally, is there anywhere you want people to find you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I am that is sort of part of my some personal goals I've set for myself is, like, setting some stuff up on social media. I mean, it's just gonna be my name, my first and last name, Robyn Stylman, like, that's my Instagram handle. I don't have a very active Instagram account, but that's, like, my Instagram handle, that's my Substack handle, like, I just kinda keep it simple. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I will maybe even by the time this goes out into the world, I'll make it my business to make sure there's, some stuff up and running in case anybody does have follow-up questions. Because 'cause
Mhm.
I'm happy to chat with anybody,
Okay,
so,
great.
yeah.
I can
Yeah.
reach you then. Robin, what a
So,
delight. Thank you, and,
any excuse to get to talk to you for an hour is
same,
I'll take
same.
it.
I feel like this whole podcast for me is just so selfish. I get to talk to interesting people, and then I just put it out in the world, and if somebody's interested, they'll pick it up, you
Yeah,
know?
I don't think that's
Um,
selfish at all. I think that's, like, the way it should be, so,
yeah.
yeah.
All right, well,
Alright, thanks, Joni.
bye.